Hey guys, how's it going? Comparing here. Today I'm going to review some of the Goblins versus Gnomes cards that I've missed because, well, they're being released like one, maybe two, maybe three every day, maybe every other day. It's a bit inconsistent, and to do a video when any one comes out just feels a bit kind of pointless because although each individual card by themselves is very awesome, in general, I feel I want to concentrate more content, wait a while, and then, make a video when a lot of them get released. So I'm going to talk about, I think we have 16 cards today that I haven't talked about, and again, I did want to talk about the fact that so many things will change with 120 new cards. Basically, all the decks that we know that exist right now are kind of out. Now, some of the concepts we'll still go through. There's still going to be some, very aggressive, pressury decks. Probably with mech cards, we've seen some, mech cards that kind of would replace maybe the Death Rattle stuff that Zoo likes to run. So I don't know. But we'll see. Anyway, let's get started. First card, Illuminator. 3 for a 2/4. I'm going to do the cards in the order that they were announced. So this is the oldest one that I didn't talk about. And funny enough, this is actually my favorite card of the upcoming expansion. Just because it allows for a very interesting play style. You can kind of make a deck that's kind of like a tank mage is what I got the idea, because you can have secrets that never trigger, like Ice Block, so you're essentially gaining 4 health a turn, and if you just gain 4 health once, it's actually a pretty good card. I mean, 3 for a 2/4 and heal yourself for 4. If the meta becomes more aggressive, and I think it will, especially in Arena when things really aren't aggressive at all, just healing yourself for 4 once is value. The card's good enough. I mean, the stats are good, and 4 health, why not? I mean, it's basically like a slightly better, at least usually, Earthen Farseer, and that card is running a lot of constructed decks. So if it hits twice, it's ridiculous. If it hits more than that, in some cases, this card will make you unstoppable. You can kind of create like a mage deck that focuses on protecting minions, maybe with Argus, that kind of stuff, more aggressive minions to protect this. And if you're getting 4 health a turn, you're probably just not going to lose. Then we have Jeeves. Jeeves is a very interesting card. It's 4 for a 1/4, which is not value at all. And at the end of each player's turn, that player draws until they have 3 cards. And this may work, 1, because it's a mech, and 2, because maybe some decks you can run them very aggressively. And it can be good. You have to kind of put in a situation like, drawing 3 cards for 4 mana and you get the body. A 1/4 body is like a 2 mana body. So for 2 mana, you can draw 3 cards if this is the last card that you play that turn. And in that regard, it's very good. But you also have to keep in mind that your opponent might be drawing as well. So it kind of gets a little bit weird. But the thing is, if you leave it on the board, draw for the turn, let's say you draw 3, and then your opponent wants to draw as well, Jeeves would have to survive and you would get another opportunity to draw yourself. So if you pretty much build a deck that's like so aggressive that you can offload 3 or 4 cards every single turn, then this card is probably worth it. But again, by itself, it's so weak that it's kind of hard to really put it in that kind of category. So I think overall this card is a bit sketchy, probably not going to be used, but I'm sure I'll be wrong on a lot of these. Next up, we got Shieldmaiden, 6 for a 5/5, Battlecry, gain 5 armor, warrior only card. And I actually thought that this card would be really good if it was neutral, because there are cards that heal yourself, but there are no cards that give armor for neutral. And it kind of makes sense. Armor is kind of the warrior thing. But warriors don't really need like a 6-drop with poor stats that's slightly defensive. I mean, you compare this to like even another neutral drop like Boulder Fist Ogre. I think you'd rather want another 1/2 in stats than 5 armor. So I think it's pretty poor, but maybe if decks become really aggressive and control warriors need to keep up by gaining more armor, then yeah, I guess it's all right. Again, if you compare this maybe to like Shield Block lets you cycle through your deck. Sometimes that's a bad thing. Right now, that's usually not a bad thing, but maybe if it becomes so, gaining 5 armor and requiring another way to combo Shield Slam, maybe it's okay. But, I have my doubts. Then we have Ancestor's Call, it's a Shaman card, 4 for put a random minion from each player's hand onto the battlefield. And this card is going to be like wild. It's so dependent on all the other cards that are going to be introduced that it's kind of difficult to gauge, but it allows for some ridiculous combos. So you can Ancestral Calls, and if you run only big minions and you make a Shaman deck with just removal and big minions, it just becomes a card that you almost always significantly outvalue whatever's in your opponent's hand. And also, you can try to save this to when your opponent has no more cards. Again, probably there's going to be a lot of aggressive decks, and aggressive decks might just offload their hand. Well, no hand, time to Ancestral's Call, you know? So there's some combos like Ancestral Calling, just legendaries in general can be ridiculous. But more specifically, the most insane thing that I can think of is Ancestral Call getting a Kel'Thuzad and then casting, Reincarnate on it. It becomes a 6 mana combo to where you get 2 Kel'Thuzads, and any other minions that died that turn, you get 1 copy of, and then you get 2 copies of if both Kel'Thuzads make it through, and they usually do. So very, very powerful stuff, but again, pretty wild. It's hard to really say if it's going to be used or not. Though, in Arena, I'd probably go for it. I'll probably wait in the top deck situation and surprise my opponent. But, yeah, it kind of feels like a far sight, basically. And we have Foe Reaper 4000. I think this is perhaps the new scariest card to leave for your opponent for when it can attack. It's 8 mana for a 6/9, so it can't be comboed with things like the charge card that Warrior has unless you save the coin, so it gets a little bit dicey. But, if this guy successfully attacks, he's so insane. Like, 6 damage to potentially 3 creatures. That's like 18 attack. And 6/9 for 8 isn't the worst stats. I mean, even if you're only doing damage to one guy, just because of the 9 health, you'd probably get the chance to attack again. And, the fact that you hit multiple targets at once, I think if you just attack once and hit 2 targets, this card is like nuts. And, the way the game's going to go, it's probably going to get that opportunity. Though I don't know how it'll be used and constructed. Yeah, it is a mech, but it's also a very, very expensive mech, so I'm not too sure. Though in Arena, this might be one of the best cards to pick, so I'm looking forward to using this guy. Also, this guy with Wind Fury, holy cow. This is just instant board clear, so there's some very, very wild stuff with this card. Then we have another warrior card, Jank Clunker. Kind of an interesting art, kind of an interesting name. It's 4 for a 2/5, which is pretty poor stats, but it's not really that bad. Like if you compare it to like a turtle, which at least in Arena is okay. It's -2 toughness, and the battle cry gives a friendly mech +2/+2. And it's a mech itself. It has that kind of archetype, and I think this is actually really good because you have to consider that the +2/+2 that you buff, you can essentially use that on a creature that was played last turn. You can also play this with a Warsong Commander to give this charge as well as the other mech that you played charge at the same time and maybe buff it out of range. So, there's a lot of cool stuff. So you kind of have to value it like 4 for a 2/5 is kind of bad, but if you sum up the full stats, it's 4 for a 4/7, which is extremely good. I mean, that's legendary status, but it's actually better than that because the +2/+2 that you give another creature can potentially be a charge effect. So it's like partial charge, 4 for 4/7, and it's the mech archetype. So this card is pretty insane. Though I don't know how strong the mech archetype will work with Warrior. I'm sure people will try, and we'll have to see. And we got Fel Cannon, 4 for a 3/5, which is solid stats. It's like Senjin, Shield Master stats, kind of. And this card will basically have taunt, kind of, unless the opponent is also playing a mech deck. But in Arena, at least, when you have a lot of random cards, I feel it's going to be pretty good because you can just play it, and often you can like coin this card into your opponent's 2-drop, which often has 2 health. So you play this, it does 2 damage to the 2-drop, and it's a 3/5 on the board. Your opponent doesn't know if you have more mech cards, especially in Arena. So I feel in Arena, this card is going to be absolutely insane. In Constructed, it's really going to be based on how many people are playing this archetype, how successful it works, and how many cards out of the normal Warlock base set you can cut. Because if you're playing a zoo and you're trying to flood the board again and again and again and again, you can't really play this card because more than likely it'll hit one of your little dudes rather than one of your opponents. So it's kind of hard to really gauge in Constructed, but we'll see. Then we have Anodized Robo Cub. So 2 for a 2/2 taunt, and you can choose to get +1 attack or +1 health. It's pretty good. It's got like the Druid of the Claw flexibility. 2 for a 2/3 taunt. I mean, that's pretty good. It's just pretty good card. I mean, it's really going to be based on if Druid Mech is going to be a thing. and maybe it is. In Arena, it's flexible enough that it beats most 2-drops, but not spectacularly so. So, pretty good. Then we have one of the better cards so far, Muster for Battle. It's 3, a Paladin-only card. You summon 3 1/1 Silver Hand Recruits, and you equip a 1/4 weapon. 1/4 weapon is basically Light's Justice. I know some of you guys are not familiar with Light's Justice, but in Arena, Light's Justice is okay. I mean, just attacking 4 times is pretty good, and in Constructed, especially because a lot of people are going to run the mech stuff, there's probably a lot of stuff that's going to have 1 health. So I actually think the weapon itself is going to get more value than Light's Justice would these days, just because of the type of cards that people will probably be playing. But in terms of value, it's 3/3 total for 3, and you get the weapon, and the weapon you can attack right away. And overall, I think this card is absolutely insane. I do know that if comboed with Sword of Justice, it spawns the 3 recruits first and then overrides the weapon. So if you have Sword of Justice up, you play this card, and if you have, let's say, 3 charges, it'll pump up 3 2/2 creatures, each one being pumped by the Sword of Justice, and then equip the 1/4 weapon. So there's a lot of cool mechanics, really, really cool stuff, but also you have to keep in mind that there's a lot of weapons being released in the new set, and that's going to make cards like Harrison Jones a bit popular, and a 1/4... oh man, that might draw a few cards. So we'll see. Again, it's going to have to fit in somewhere to really realize the potential. Another Paladin card release, we have Cobalt Guardian, 5 for a 6/3. In terms of stats, it's acceptable, I guess. I mean, it's kind of like Yeti stats total, but 3 health kind of sucks, but it's Divine Shield, kind of. Whenever you summon a mech, gain Divine Shield, and you can repeat this effect. So if every turn you play a mech, you can gain a new Divine Shield every turn. The Divine Shield is essentially on the Cobalt Guardian. It doesn't give the creature that you play Divine Shield. It's just this creature just repeatedly gains Divine Shield. And that's kind of good, except for the fact that it's 5 mana. So to really protect this card and have it survive the next turn, you'll probably have to play it with another mech. So you're talking about like a turn 6 play at least, and that just seems pretty subpar. I feel this is a card that might spiral out of control, but I think the cost to invest them on the board, the fact that you probably need board control, there's just so many factors that seem unlikely to really line up for it to reach its true potential. So this is kind of one of those cards that I don't think is very good at all. But, you know, I might be wrong. Paladin mech might be a thing. This card might be out of control. And it would be if it survives, if it works. I just not so optimistic. Now we have Toshli, a legendary neutral, 5/7 for 6, which is pretty poor stats. It pretty much loses to Boulder Fist Ogre. The Battlecry and Death Rattle add a spare part to your hand. Spare parts are like, you know, 1 mana gain taunt or something, 1 mana freeze a unit, just kind of shitty little cards. So in that end, it's kind of good. It's maybe a little bit better than Boulder Fist in terms of that. But what I think is pretty bad is because while the Battlecry is good, you know, you can add a spare part to your hand right away. I get that. That's cool and all. But the Death Rattle is to add a spare part to your hand. And I feel that can really get in the way. These kind of cards are a little bit risky, especially the big ones. So what I mean is, like, you look at Loot Hoarder, right? Loot Hoarder draws you a card when it dies, but it's 2 mana. So you play some garbage, then you play Loot Hoarder, and then if it dies, you don't overdraw. But if it's like turn 6, you play this guy, you have a spare part in your hand, so that's another card, and then your opponent kills it, you get another spare card, and that might actually counterfeit your draw for the turn. So it can really mess with the draws, and I feel this card can often become a liability in the deck, and that's why I think it's actually pretty garbage. Then we have Mech Bear Cat, 6 for a 7/6 Druid only rare. Mech, of course, whenever this minion takes damage, add a spare part card to your hand. So it kind of has the same issue as the card that I just mentioned. If it's attacked repeatedly, your opponent essentially controls and can manipulate you to overdraw. So because of that reason alone, I feel in Constructed it may be kind of poor, unless perhaps you're running like very fast archetype mech decks. Though I just don't really see that. In Arena though, often you kind of go through cards pretty quick, and 6 for a 7/6, that's Boulder Fist status, and stats, yeah, a little bit worse, because you know you kind of want that 7th health rather than that 7th attack, because you get big gamed. But still, I think in Arena it's still quite solid. There's a lot of garbage rares in Arena, and this is one that I wouldn't consider quite garbage. You have the Hunter card. This one's been really talked about. It's 2 mana, call Pet. Draw a card if it's a beast that costs 4 less. In Arena, this card is pretty terrible because you're not likely to draw many beasts, and, well, if you are, people run hard removal. So, you know, in Arena, let's say you're lucky enough to get a high main, well, it might just get hexed. So, yeah. It can become problematic because, well, you have to invest that 2 mana, and if it's not a beast, it kind of really sucks. And also in Construct, you have to keep in mind, even if you put cards that this can actually hit in your deck, there's 2 issues. The first is, most of those cards suck, like Turtle and, I don't know, Corehound, that kind of stuff. Yeah, there's better beasts, but there's not really that many of them. I think if you put like every decent beast over 4 mana, there's like maybe 5, maybe 6. And I mean like sketchy decent. So I'm not too optimistic about this card. Also, you have to keep in mind that because even right now with the Death Rattle meta, the board control is so aggressive that you can't really afford to play this on turn 2. Like people talk about, oh, you can innervate out this, it's so amazing. Yeah, but you can't do that. Like, when have you ever played against the Hunter and then he skipped his 2-drop, he did nothing, and then won? Okay, maybe a few times because Hunters are overpowered. But in general, because the board is so aggressive, you kind of need those drops on turn 2. You can't just miss a 2-drop. You can't play Call Pet and then get like a freeze trap. That sets you so far behind on board that, it may actually cost you the game. And I think this might be even more punishing because I feel a lot of people are going to run like the very quick mech type decks. Then we have a rogue card, Iron Sensei. I thought this card was kind of bad at the beginning, but it's pretty good. I mean, it's 3 for a 2/2. At the end of your turn, give another friendly mech +2/+2, and it's also a mech. Rogue kind of can take board control very easily in the early game with Deadly Poison, with backstabs, with SI agents. So, often you will have another creature at that stage in the game, but I don't know. This card can get out of control if your opponent is starting to lose. Your mechs just get bigger and bigger and bigger, like crazy, because I believe this is a repetitive effect, kind of like Kel'Thuzad. So if it hits once, it's all right. It's kind of like 3 for a 4/4 kind of, but you need that other mech in play. And if you don't have that, it's a pretty garbage card. But if it hits a second time, you're talking some serious value. I mean, that's 6/6 for 3. So this can be crazy. It's just, we'll have to see how easy it is to have these mechs stick on your board. So I don't know how that'll work out, and we'll see. Then we got Coghammer. This is a paladin weapon. It's 3 for a 2/3, so it's basically a Stormforged Axe. Stormforged Axe costs 2, Overload 1, so the cost is about the same, but this, in addition to that, has a battle cry to give a random friendly minion Divine Shield and Taunt. And usually as a paladin, because your 1/1 dudes that you spawn from your hero power are disposable, you can kind of attack, waste all your creatures, and then play this on your biggest remaining creatures. So I feel this card is actually absurdly good. I think this is one of the best cards released, especially in Arena when people just play, like vanilla minions, so like Boulder Fist Ogre, You kind of have to think of it like, early game, this card is good because it's a weapon that deals with all the early game garbage. Late game, it's kind of like an Argent Protector, but better. Because an Argent Protector late game is just a 2/2 body. Effectively, you just use it for the Divine Shield. So this gives you the Divine Shield, it gives you that taunt effect, and it gives you the weapon to really, kind of mess with the damage in the late game. And Paladin, their heals are mostly late game, so you can kind of gain back the life that you lose from this weapon at that stage of the game. So I feel this card is very fitting, very powerful, and it might actually be the best epic for Paladin in Arena. So we'll see. The last card I'm going to cover today, this is the most recent one released. It's the Antique Healbot. 5 for a 3/3, which is pretty much dumpster stats. The battle cry is to restore 8 health to your hero, and it's a mech. So it's kind of bad, but again, it really depends on how the games are going to be played. For instance, if you guys remember when everyone was playing Freeze Mage, like, I don't know, almost a year ago now, people just used every single heal they could possibly get their hands on. And if that becomes the case, and if they have other mech cards that synergize pretty well, this might actually be a pretty popular cards in decks. But the stats are so poor that it's kind of hard to see that happening constructed. In Arena, I feel it's also okay. There's just usually going to be a better common, especially because of the fact that most of the cards released are pretty good. This kind of falls below that a little bit in general. The closest card to really compare it to is like Priest of Elune, which is 6 for a 5/4 body. So it's 1 more mana, plus 2 attack, plus 1 toughness, but you gain 4 less health. So, this is probably a little better than that, and a bit more so because it's a mech and because Priestess is nothing. So lots of stuff to consider. Really cool cards. Really excited. I mean, they said it'll come out in a month. A month is ticking away, guys. I mean, we're looking at 2 to 4 weeks or so, maybe 5 if they're really fucking lazy. But no, they don't work on Christmas. The expansion have to come out before Christmas. So we're looking at 4 weeks max to play this shit. And, well, they still got a lot of cards left to announce. I don't know how many of them they'll get through before the expansion is released, but I'm excited. I want to play. Hope you guys are excited too. Hope you guys enjoy my review, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.